The knock came at 11:47 on a freezing Saturday night, 3 sharp taps against my front door that made me stop halfway up the stairs. I had been planning to spend the evening alone, pretending I was perfectly fine with the silence that had filled my house since my wife passed away. But when I opened the door, my neighbor stood there in a soft robe and slippers, her hair slightly messy from sleep, staring at me with an expression I couldn't understand. Then she looked past me toward the backyard and said the one thing I never expected to hear that night: "You're not getting in that hot tub alone." For the first time in nearly 2 years, someone had noticed that I wasn't okay. Before we continue, if you believe people deserve kindness, second chances, and unexpected moments of hope, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change an entire life. My name is Daniel, and after losing my wife, I became very good at pretending. I pretended the empty chair at the kitchen table didn't bother me. I pretended I didn't notice how quiet the house sounded after sunset. I pretended that working late at my small architectural firm was a choice instead of an escape. Even the hot tub in my backyard had become part of that routine. My wife and I had bought it during the happiest year of our marriage, imagining ourselves sitting there on winter nights, laughing about our day and planning vacations we never got to take. After she died unexpectedly from an illness, I stopped using it. Until that winter. That night, I had finally decided to turn it on. I told myself it was simply because the cold had settled deep into my bones. The truth was harder to admit. I wanted to feel something warm again. I wanted to remember what it was like to relax without carrying a weight in my chest. I had barely stepped outside when I heard the knock. Standing at my door was Emma, my neighbor from across the driveway. She was 38, a widow herself, and the kind of person who always seemed to have a smile ready for everyone except herself. We had exchanged polite greetings for almost a year, sometimes carried each other's packages inside, and occasionally talked over the fence. But neither of us had ever crossed the invisible line between being neighbors and becoming friends. That night, she crossed it. She didn't ask permission to come inside. She simply looked at my face, then at the backyard, and told me she wasn't letting me sit out there alone. I almost laughed. I told her I could handle a hot tub by myself. She shook her head and said that wasn't what she meant. She knew what lonely people did when they convinced themselves they were fine. She had done it too. Something in her voice silenced me. A few minutes later, we were sitting across from each other in the warm water, fully covered and keeping a respectful distance. Snow drifted quietly across the dark backyard while steam rose around us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Emma began telling me about her husband. She said he had died 3 years earlier, and for months afterward she kept setting 2 plates on the dinner table without realizing it. She said grief wasn't always crying. Sometimes it was reaching for someone who wasn't there. I finally admitted that I still reached for my wife. Emma didn't tell me to move on. She didn't say everything happened for a reason. She simply nodded, as though she understood that some wounds didn't need advice. They needed someone willing to sit beside them. That night changed something between us. After that, our conversations became longer. We started drinking coffee on Saturday mornings. Emma brought homemade bread, and I pretended not to notice that she always made enough for 2 people. I fixed a loose cabinet door in her kitchen, and she somehow found an excuse to bring dinner over afterward. Neither of us called it friendship at first. We were simply 2 lonely people discovering that silence was easier when someone else was sharing it. But life has a way of testing the things we begin to love. One afternoon, I received an email from my firm informing me that a major project had been canceled. I had invested months into it, and without that contract, I was facing serious financial problems. I spent the entire evening staring at bills spread across my kitchen table. I didn't tell Emma. The next morning, she found me sitting on my porch before sunrise. She didn't ask what was wrong. She simply sat beside me. Eventually, I told her everything. She listened and then surprised me by admitting that she was struggling too. Her small bookstore had been losing money for months. She had been considering selling it, even though it was the last thing she had left that reminded her of her husband. The realization hit me hard. While I had been quietly drowning, she had been doing the same thing behind a smile. So we made a strange agreement. Neither of us would pretend anymore. If one of us had a terrible day, we would say so. If one of us needed company, we would ask. If one of us felt like giving up, the other would show up. It wasn't romantic at first. It was something more important. It was trust. Weeks passed, and slowly, our lives began to change. I helped Emma redesign the bookstore's cramped back room into a small reading space. She organized a weekend event featuring local writers, and the store filled with people. I watched from the doorway as she smiled for the first time in months, and I realized how deeply I cared about seeing that smile. Then came the night everything almost fell apart. I had been working late when Emma called. Her voice sounded frightened. She said someone had broken the front window of her bookstore. I drove there immediately. The police arrived, but nothing valuable had been taken. The broken glass seemed almost pointless, like someone had wanted to frighten her rather than steal anything. Emma stood in the middle of the store, trembling. I stayed until the glass was cleaned. When I finally took her home, she asked me to stay for coffee. We sat at her kitchen table until nearly 2 in the morning. She told me she was tired of being afraid. I told her I was tired of losing people. For the first time, we reached across the table and held hands. Neither of us pulled away. That simple touch carried more emotion than any declaration could have. The following months brought unexpected victories. Emma's bookstore began thriving after the community discovered the new reading space. My architectural firm recovered after I secured several smaller projects. We celebrated every success together, even the tiny ones. But the biggest change happened inside us. We stopped measuring our lives by what we had lost. One snowy evening, almost a year after that first knock, I found myself standing beside the hot tub again. Emma came through my backyard gate carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. She smiled and reminded me of the night she had first appeared at my door in her robe. I laughed and told her I still thought she had been completely unreasonable. She smiled and said she would do it again. This time, when we stepped into the warm water, I didn't feel like I was trying to escape my past. I was simply enjoying the present. I looked across at Emma and realized something I had been too afraid to admit. She hadn't replaced my wife. She never could, and she never tried. Instead, she had helped me understand that loving someone again didn't erase the love that came before. It simply meant my heart had survived. And maybe that was the greatest second chance of all. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may be quietly struggling, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who might need a little hope tonight. And before we end, I want you to comment one word: second chance. Maybe someone reading your comment is wondering whether their life can still change. Let them know that it can. That night, beneath the falling snow, Emma rested her hand in mine. The backyard was quiet, the world was cold, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I had learned that sometimes healing doesn't arrive with a miracle. Sometimes it arrives with 3 knocks on your door, a neighbor wearing a robe, and someone brave enough to say, "You don't have to be alone anymore." And sometimes, the person who comes to save you from loneliness ends up becoming the reason you finally learn how to live again.